More and more, we're seeing big money flowing into Tesla stock. The news this time is famed American billionaire investor Stanley Druckenmiller bought 37,675 shares of Tesla, likely around the $400 mark in the fourth quarter. These big whales are falling one at a time, and it shows that Tesla is now becoming a must-have stock. Second, we have Ken Griffin's Citadel Advisors buying $1.62 billion of Tesla puts and $1.5 billion of Tesla calls. As of the last reported filings in Q4, Citadel's Tesla exposure appears net bullish. Third, in a recent interview, Dan Ives talks about how Tesla is just now entering into a massive period of growth. And finally, we have George Gianarikas of Canaccord saying he believes EVs, robotics, FSD, and energy storage for Tesla will be through the roof in 2027. We've got Jeff Lutz here with us. Jeff is the ex-CVP of Supply Chain and Chief Quality Officer. He's now CEO of his own supply chain consulting firm. Welcome, Jeff.
Yeah, a lot of activity with some big names.
Yeah, so money, right? They're all flowing in. It's happening in Q4. I think you'll tell me if you think it's true, but it's almost like you cannot, if you're big money at this point, you can no longer ignore Tesla. We're at that point, we'll see. But here's one big name, Stanley Druckenmiller, the Queen's family office bought 37,675 shares of Tesla during the fourth quarter. How big of a deal is this, Jeff?
Yeah, I think these are some of the most, storied investors. I think it's, Druckenmiller, Dalio. You're seeing Ken Griffin. You're seeing other names coming in, and some of these are starter positions. Some of them are bigger. Some of them are heavily hedged. But it's really showing. Again, I think the viewers should understand that this was some point in the fourth quarter. They could have exited their position. They could have increased their position since then. There are a number of things that could happen from that point in time to where we are today. But I think what it's showing, I think these names are going to be very surprising to people who think that Tesla is just this crazy whacked out retail only name. And now you're seeing again some of the most respected multi-decade huge funds that are, again, they're different sizes of positions. A lot of them, I would say, are starter positions for them. But I would say that it's really starting to show some movement, starting to show some momentum that beyond this retail community and beyond some of these, I would say, obviously you put Ron Barron out there, he has a huge position, but if you take the traditional names, the Cathie Wood, the Ron Barron names aside, and now you're starting to see some of the non-traditionals come in. It's a signal. It's certainly a signal. It's certainly not nothing. Again, they're starter positions. They could have already exited. They could have massively increased them. A number of scenarios could play out, but this activity, I think, there could be some meaning behind it.
Yeah, you mentioned Ray Dalio, and you're right. So here's Ray Dalio. He bought $62 million worth of Tesla yesterday. He's founder of Bridgewater Associates. I don't know if he bought it yesterday, but it was reported yesterday, according to a new 13F filing. And Bridgewater is one of the world's largest hedge funds. And Elon replied saying, smart move.
Yeah.
So money's coming in. And I think you're right. He initiated, and this was what you were saying, they have to dip their toes in.
Yeah. This is telling you that, again, this is beyond retail. It's beyond anything else. So I think this whole community out there that just wants to say that like retail doesn't understand what's going on. The Teslas, just they're putting this information. You're really starting to get pressure tested now from some of the biggest names in the investment community. And I think the rhetoric around Tesla, has to change a bit. And by the way, the whole conversation around, people not wanting to invest in Tesla, Elon, the politics, sure, there's something to that. I'm sure people may know investors, but the biggest names and the biggest funds during that same period are entering.
Yep, they're buying. So the interesting thing, of course, is you got to be careful, right, as a retail investor, because some of these guys are actually manipulating the stock. The stock is very, very volatile. We've got Ken Griffin, Citadel Advisors. He's been buying Tesla, but he buys both puts and calls. 1.62 billion of puts and 1.5 billion of calls. And like I said in my intro, when I first looked into this, he's apparently net positive for now. That his exposure is net bullish for now.
Depends what the strike. Yeah, where I got it.
Yeah, I guess he's trying to, he knows that it's very volatile. So he might play the puts, for short term and then long term. So this is a post you made last year, January 30th of last year. And you said the Citadel's Ken Griffin, this is what he said about Tesla and Elon Musk, that Elon's a phenomenal entrepreneur, makes a great car, opportunity to create the software platform for future auto. First self-driving cars are most likely to come from this. So let's listen in to Ken Griffin, what he said last year.
U.S. companies, your Fords and GMs, are still trying to catch up with Tesla. And Tesla has one great asset. Elon is a phenomenal entrepreneur. And I think that don't lose sight of the fact that Tesla makes a great car, but there's an opportunity at Tesla to create the software platform for the future of automobiles. The self-driving car, good chance, will first happen at Tesla.
So he said that last year. So obviously he seems to get it. He understands this and he's making his bets.
That was 12.1 time period for FSD. And just look how far we've come. So yeah, I think, your channel is, way more informed and putting out a lot of this information. I think that could be useful for major fund managers, for anybody that's interested in just understanding or just following the company. There's just in a year's time, I think the gap has grown. He was talking about the Fords and GMs of the world. What's happened to the Fords and GMs of the world over the last year and a half? Ford exited their Argo relationship. GM has basically exited most, or if not all, of the Cruise relationship, and they really went nowhere. So investment dollars burned, just literally lit on fire. And what Tesla has done is 1000x improved their system by their own reporting. So the gap has grown even since that Ken Griffin conversation. But yeah, he's definitely going to be hedged in terms of his position. So it'll be interesting to see at some point. This is the thing that people are talking about out there. Is at some point, when does that crest arrive for the humanoid time? When does it arrive in terms of vehicles and autonomy going at mass scale? At some point that arrives, and the market's going to move far ahead of it. I think the market has started. By the way, people that think that Tesla is not getting credit for its AI capability, should look at the multiple on its stock relative to the multiple of others. So Tesla is getting credit, but it could be actually a whole lot more, quite frankly. So we'll see what happens.
So these were some of the big names, but the biggest name that people are, keep dabbling with is Warren Buffett. Now Berkshire Hathaway is now run by the second, layer of lieutenants. And so is it crazy? Like I believe that Buffett will invest in Tesla. I get that they are value investors. They wait for money, cash on hand. They want to see, revenue, real sales. But they did end up buying into Tesla, Apple. And of course they did that 2012 when it was already kind of established. They're late in the game. What's the chance of Buffett?
Yeah, I put less value on if he enters or not. I know there's a lot of media sphere around him still, but I think that I have great respect for him, but I just put less value on it. And he has a history of kind of entering these things very late in the cycle. But yeah, it could happen. Typically, they don't like super noisy companies, and they don't like super noisy CEOs. Probably, I think they have a history of. So there's a couple of boxes that aren't being checked. But in terms of the capability, and then they have this whole insurance tie up. They have a lot of investments on the insurance side, so there could be a lot of disruptions with vehicles and autonomy as it relates to that. So yeah, you've heard
that's the reason why he might invest. But yeah,
you just heard. You heard Dalio, Griffin, Druck. These are some of the biggest names. I think Tepper had a position last year. These guys could put a position on, take it off in a couple of days. They're traders, some of them. So, but yeah, I think you're just starting to see a lot more activity in this space from some of the biggest names.
Okay. Then another analyst, of course, that we love in Tesla retail community here is Dan Ives. Dan Ives has been on a few times, but he says a few things that's interesting this time around. So he says, he was just interviewed recently, and he says that the near-term noise, he doesn't think that any of the near-term noise it's going to be like, what's going to happen is there's a massive period of growth for Tesla. Let's listen to what he said.
Tesla down over 11% since the start of the year. Despite the uncertainty ahead, Dan Ives of Wedbush reiterating his overweight rating on the stock. Dan joins us now for more. Dan, welcome to the program, sir. Lots to get through. That name is up in the pre-market just a little bit, but it's had a struggle recently. What is behind that struggle, Dan?
Look, I think it's really the worries about distraction with Doge, as well as maybe some softer numbers that have come out of China, and as well as Europe, right? So I think there's worries about distraction. The Musk, is there brand deterioration? But look, we strongly disagree. I believe it's going to be known as the bet for the ages in terms of Musk on Trump. And when it comes to autonomous, that's worth $1 trillion. That continues to be the golden goose. That's what they're focused on. So I think any of this is near-term noise into just what's going to be a massive period of growth for Tesla.
It's not all noise. So let's get to some of the signal. Talk to me about the challenge to autonomous driving, the challenge posed not just from, say, Waymo, but also from BYD. How strong is that challenge?
Look, it's a challenge, but I think the biggest issue is that in the U.S. there's really no federal roadmap. The whole point here, and why it was so bullish in terms of Trump and Musk, ultimately this is now going to lay out on the federal side a roadmap for autonomous. Now, look, there are challenges. You look at what's happened in China as well. But I think that's something that ultimately Tesla is going to be massively competitive when it comes to everything in China. That's going to be a huge, strong market for them. And there's nothing that makes me view this as a zero-sum game. We're in the beginning of what's going to really be trillions of dollars spent.
Let's just say, and this might be a hypothetical and this might be real, Dan, that BYD gets subsidized by the Chinese government in order to make enough inroads that they can offer cheap data and cheap technology that achieves some of what Elon Musk is promising, but a much lower price point. Why wouldn't that cannibalize from his potential demand significantly in one of the biggest markets?
Is that a headwind? Yeah, no doubt. Is there some cannibalization? But I think it just comes down to they produce the best product out there. When it comes to their cars, in terms of Tesla, and it comes to ultimately what they're going to have when it comes to autonomous, that's a brand that's, I think, going to go through all that noise. And I think they're going to continue to ultimately gain share in China. And I think when I look at the U.S., despite some of maybe contained brand issues, when I look at autonomous and robotics, that's 90% of the story going forward. So any of this near-term worries, I think the bar's going to be a lot worse than a bite in terms of where just this broader innovation's going. I believe the best is ahead for Tesla, not in the rearview mirror.
I thought that her question was a little bit leading, assuming that BYD is going to be able to launch something that's going to be so much cheaper, so much more valuable.
Yeah, it's so much there. First off, I think it would kind of be a little bit of a pressure release valve for Tesla investors and people following the company is the following. If there wasn't this Musk White House tie-up, you wouldn't be able to unlock, just follow me here, you wouldn't be able to unlock the capability with a global, especially a federal, as Dan was saying, a federal autonomous solution. You wouldn't have that ability for that unlock. You'd have the revert. You'd have this unbelievable pressure coming on both Elon himself personally, and then of course his companies being lawfared against, as we saw in the prior situation. So if you didn't have the tie-up that's happening right now, and you can even go back further, you can even say, look, like the country would be potentially insolvent if Doge wasn't doing what it's doing. But even take that to the side and say, okay, that's lore, that would never happen. Yeah, it actually could happen. You just read some history and understand. But let's just put that to the side for perspective. Elon, White House, tie-up, federal autonomous framework. Is he going to sit there and develop that actual framework? No, but he's going, his presence and the fact that the administration isn't working against him, they can have a separate body of people come up with what that could look like. And yeah, of course, Tesla, they would want input from Tesla. They would want input from Alphabet. They would want input from other companies. But now we can have something that's done in a more sane manner than just, trying to attack, one of the CEOs of one company. So number one, you need that tie-up for federal autonomous framework. Number two, just for AI and the AI regulatory framework, and what will lead the proper, safe AI and keep the U.S. in a leading position. And then the third thing is the introduction of humanoids and how we would deal with that economically? How will we deal with that societally? How will we deal with that from a regulatory framework? And then what is the overall regulatory framework to build products in the United States and to make stuff? If you did not have Elon there working on relieving the regulatory side and then developing those three frameworks for autonomy, for AI, for vehicle autonomy, for AI, and for humanoids, all the stuff that Tesla's been doing would not be able to be unlocked and to get out there in the way, it should. So if you're interested in Tesla and the company, or if you're an investor in the company, we're not giving you advice to invest or not invest. Just know that tie-up is critical in unlocking and just giving Tesla a fair shot and SpaceX a fair shot at the marketplace and in a way where these things can actually really grow.
Okay. I appreciate that. And what about the comment about BYD and China?
Yeah, I mean, it's a well-informed question in terms of will the Chinese government subsidize? Of course they will. And of course they are. And the question is well, what's the brain? Like, what are the brains behind it? What are they building? Is it going to work? Is it going to work at scale? What's the cost structure? What's the business model behind it? The CCP can't do that. The CCP can make sure money's flowing in so these things can be developed. Because quite frankly, it's not even clear that BYD produces EVs profitably. They have a very large auto business. Nobody knows their channel. By the way, I'm not like a BYD hater, but you have to ask basic questions. Like, we don't know their channel inventory. We don't know their real, their real true. There's other reports out there that are well researched that go into their debt position being significantly different. And then quite frankly, they've had this pattern that's publicly documented by Bloomberg, by Reuters, by other entities in China of them extending payment terms from the low 100 days 4 years ago to now 250 to 270 day payment terms for BYD. So yeah, this whole chain needs to be subsidized. The question is at some point, does it implode or not? I'm not saying it's going to implode tomorrow. I'm not saying they may not be able to figure it out, but when you say like, we're going to throw money or we're going to do a deep seek partnership with BYD, we're going back to these really clunky, marriages of like, yeah, your name's out there, you're popular, you're doing something pretty good. We're out there, we build a lot of, let's merge, let's make a deal. You're going to have a lot of that. The question is what synergies are you really going to have on the other side? Is anybody name some of the big, huge marriages between two Chinese companies and and what's been produced from a tech perspective that's super meaningful? No, actually they have a quite the history in terms of vertical integration actually in China. When you think of a Huawei, when you think of a BYD, so it'll be interesting to see what happens here. Is there something there? Yes. Is BYD's announcement and God's Eye and so forth, is there functionality today that's equivalent to Tesla FSD and Tesla's FSD ability to scale? Not from anything that we've seen, and not that anything that BYD's put out there and made a claim to.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you for explaining that. Everybody just jumped the gun thinking BYD's a competitor today. Watch out. Yes, you have to be careful with any company, but when you drill down, they have ADAS and they have cameras and LiDAR. They have not built out neural nets. They don't have the supercomputes. They haven't solved anything yet. They're just starting. So yes, could happen, but we don't have to exaggerate exactly what they're able to do.
Yeah. And Herbert, we could be crystal clear on the vehicle side as well. Yeah. On the vehicle side, Tesla just in the price tiers that Tesla participates and produces vehicles and puts them out in the market, they kill BYD in China. They kill BYD globally. They kill them both in volume and they kill them on the business model in terms of profitability. So the real threat is when does Tesla start playing in price tiers that they don't play in today, that BYD dominates, which are the $20,000 to $30,000, and then they call it the $13,000 to $20,000 US dollar tiers. If Tesla starts coming into their tiers, all it does is going to be eating market share and eating volume from them. But Tesla is not waiting. Tesla is preparing a profitable solution. Tesla does not enter into
margin.
these things without an end game to be having a profitable business model.
And at the BYD, as you alluded to, we've done research on it. They're not more positive in margin. And so then at the lower price points, they're not going to be able to lower that price and have a price war and value. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. Okay. Next one is George Gianarikas of Canaccord. Here's what he's saying.
With Elon Musk in the spotlight almost daily for his DOGE reforms of the federal government, we're watching for the impact on Tesla stock. Despite surging nearly 40% since the election, stock has fallen double digits since the president took office. Joining us this morning, Canaccord's George Gianarikas is with us. Price target of 404 and keeps his buy rating. George, always good to talk to you. Happy Friday.
Happy Friday. Thanks for having me, Carl.
You've written a lot. We talked about the deliveries and the margins and delivery guidance going into the quarter last time. Have you written a lot about the Musk brand and whether it's subsuming the Tesla brand?
Look, Carl, the reality is that the trends in the U.S. and Europe last year weren't great. They were saved by a remarkably strong year in China. And so far this year, just the little eensy-beensy data points that we have suggest that the trends aren't great so far in 2025. But the stock is really hinging upon the new vehicles that they're introducing. First, the new Model Y, which looks like a remarkably nice vehicle, and the promise of additional vehicles throughout the rest of the year. So what Elon Musk referred to on the call about I think an epic 2026 and ridiculous 27 and 28 had a lot to do with new product introductions, both on the vehicle side. Obviously, they're going to start ramping Optimus production. So we'll have to wait and see. We kept our buy rating because usually in technology or in vehicles, when you have new products coming out, and the company's done a really good job of introducing new products that people like, those tend to really move the P&L and reinvigorate growth. So that's what we're hoping for, and we'll see. We'll find out how compelling the new vehicles are. So far, so good with the new Model Y.
All right, we mentioned this Wired piece, and I know Wired's been critical of Musk in general, but they do point to the sales declines that we have numbers for, and they get into this culture of fans who are at least vocal about disowning their Teslas somehow. How relevant is that when so much of at least your research is about full self-driving and Optimus and so forth?
It's really important, right? So Tesla has to have vehicles on the road that people want to buy in order to adopt full self-driving. And there's a really important data point this year. They're going to start Cybercab rides in Austin in the middle of the year. And so we'll see how successful that is. Obviously, Elon Musk has made many promises about full self-driving and now unsupervised full self-driving in the middle of the year. The autonomous business is incredibly important for Tesla going forward, not just because we said so, but because Elon Musk has said so. Number one, they have to see better adoption rates for people who already own Teslas that can adopt it. That'll move the margins. But also, they have to have a successful launch of the Cybercab in Austin this year for people to believe that their technology approach is the right one. Their technology approach is controversial. They're using only cameras. Other companies that we cover in this space use multiple sensors, and according to the company, they're relying on a neural network approach, i.e., there's no software encoding. You don't have engineers who are overriding the AI to make decisions for the vehicle.
Yeah, that's a good point. So what's your take on that with the toxicity of, right now it's very peak Elon hate. There's a lot of people saying, I'm going to sell my cars, my Tesla. So volume of sales, is it going to go up or down? I know your answer is that it's very nuanced. There's lots of things that affect volumes of sales. This is just one of them. But then, of course, the other side is autonomy. It's such a big technological, I just want to keep referring to it as an invention to get people to understand this is not just a new feature. This is a new invention that's going to revolutionize what a car is. And so then that will override any of this kind of concerns that people have. Or make it less important. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I thought George was very balanced and had a good command of the facts in the conversation. So, I mean, is this going to affect, is there going to be some effect on sales? Sure. The question is, what are the net effects? And when I say by what are the net effects, or how many people are out there going and buying that wouldn't consider, an EV or a Tesla or a product beforehand. So that's hard to gauge, but I mean, it is, clear to say that a lot of the people that were the early adopters in EVs were the people that are worried about environment, people that are mostly from one side of the political equation versus the other. But like I said, that TAM is going to grow as, again, now you're overcoming things that were barriers in the past. If you're really concerned about, climate and so forth, you had to pay more money to get one of these vehicles. I wasn't overly, I'm concerned about climate and I believe in doing the right things for climate. But when I was looking at a Model S in 2012, I mean, you have a dual motor. I got a rear wheel drive vehicle. They didn't even have dual motor. And, it was $120,000 vehicle in 2012, 2013. So the cost structure has come a long way. Everything's come a long way. So yeah, will there be some effect? Sure. I mean, if people should look, these things don't last forever. I mean, look up who the founder is of Volkswagen, and Audi. So these things don't last forever, and you don't have to tie any of these things together one way or another. In the end, I think there's just going to be a lot of noise in terms of some of the stuff that Elon is going after. The question you have to ask yourself is are things moving in somewhat of a positive or in fair direction? And by the way, I wouldn't necessarily put Elon in one. I mean, today he's kind of clearly in aligning with one political affiliation, but he's more issue based versus, he's very liberal in many, he's socially extremely liberal in many respects. He's fiscally more conservative. So I think his belief system spans multiple parties actually, and he's way more of a centrist than people. That's why the whole thing about trying to put him into the far right, it actually doesn't work, because then all of a sudden when you double click into the name and say, oh, well, who are the last, 4 people that he's had children with, or who, when you start double clicking into these things, he can't actually be inextricably tied to what people are trying to tie him to. So anyway, I think these debates don't go far. I think innovation actually overcomes a lot of things, and I think at the end of the day, this is a kind of a journey and an end state. I think people are going to find him to be very fair, and I think they're going to find him. They may not agree with him on everything, but I think we're going to find that he's trying to do the right thing for humanity. He's trying to do the right thing, and he's not trying to. He's got $400 billion. He's not trying to find your social security number to get another couple $1,000 or whatever. He's not trying to do that. There's just some ridiculous things that are out there. And I think there's 90% noise and 10% signal. And I think if we can just help get people to more of the signal and less of the noise. By the way, I don't agree with every decision, every communication, every single direction everything goes into, but I'm really honestly trying to separate signal and noise, in these conversations. So is there some impact? Maybe short term, possibly, but the Tesla has the mass quantity, if you go and sell your Tesla today, you're putting your car, you've already helped Tesla, you've already purchased the vehicle. Okay. So if you go and sell your car, that's some great virtue signaling, but someone else is going to go buy it. And there's already a fleet of 8 million of them, roughly 8 million of them out there. And that to me, that is the critical thing now for the next stage, which is autonomy.
Yeah, you've been repeating this quite often in the last several weeks, specifically this whole idea of signal versus noise, because there is so much noise right now. And the key for us Tesla investors to understand when something happens, is that important? How important is it? Yes, it does affect, but is it really that important in the big picture? What is the signal? And that's, thank you for sharing always your point, which is the signal. These Tesla cars, you sell them today, but if you, in maybe even 6 months, maybe a year from now, maybe just a year or 2 years from now, that price is going to go up. Your used car will be double the value, whatever it becomes, maybe even 5 times the value, but certainly double the value. I can probably sell my old Model 3 for $100,000 next year. If it becomes a robo-taxi capable vehicles. So, okay.
Well, and I think the other thing that people should just keep in mind is, they really have to separate what they're seeing, because like, for example, the picketing at all the different Tesla sites. I mean, first off, like a handful of people showed up, and then there's websites that these people were appointed to, and these websites were actually doing the central organization. So these are political PACs. These are things that, and by the way, both sides of the political spectrum do these things. But this was organized. And, the sign I even posted the exact same sign was made in Washington, D.C. that was used in Manhattan. So it's not like there's people at home, like with magic markers scribbling out, and like, they have central, like they're fed talking points and they're fed messaging. And I feel sorry for people. I want them to just think independently and think on their own. You could be against some of the things that Elon is doing, and that's fine. I just wish that there was just this ability or capacity for more independent thought. And again, if you're picketing against a United States company that's employing hundreds, tens of thousands of people in the United States, I mean, what are you doing? Like, what are you telling them to go do? Especially if you step out of your Audi or Volkswagen, you understand the founder of that company, or are you telling them to step into a Ford or GM that may have been made in Mexico or Canada? 1 in 3 of them were made. Like, what are you actually doing? And it just feels like a lot of this, so much of this is manufactured, and so much of this is noise, and very, very, very little of it is the actual signal. All of it's just all made up. Like Elon stealing my social security number, like all this stuff is just, it's literally fabricated. The question is like, is there real signal? Is there real wrongdoing? Is there really something fundamental? And I think this will need some time to play out. I think it's going to be noisy for Tesla investors and for people that follow the company in the meantime. I don't feel like anything has actually been done wrong to harm humanity or to harm people. And I think the net effects are going to be good. And I'm continuing to be supportive. I'm also critical. I'll be critical in the same time. In the past videos, you've heard me in terms of various things going on with the company, but I don't think that there's any fundamental wrongdoing happening here.
Thank you so much, Jeff.
My opinion.
Yep. My opinion as well. Follow Jeff on X, the Jeff Lutz. Subscribe to him, and you'll get some detailed analysis, facts about what's happening with everything but the Tesla cars, bots, AI, FSD. Thanks, Jeff. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
I've created a website that is the most comprehensive resource for the Tesla investor. Please check it out. Simply go to my website at herbertong.com.